Hi, y'all. It's Angela, and I'm back for another episode of Business Unveiled. I am so excited about this subject today because I feel like this happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners. Back when I started my business, doing this was not readily available. There were not website, there wasn't YouTube videos like tutorials that could help you build your own website. And so today we're going to be talking with an amazing website educator. That's exactly what she does. She educates people on how to have a good website. And what most of us may have you've either experienced this or you've heard a story about it, a nightmare, like a website nightmare. So the website educator of Bon Accord Creative, BrendaCadman, is going to be sharing with us how to avoid a website nightmare. And there's lots of great talking points, so you're going to want to listen all the way through, even if you don't have a website, which some newer, younger people that we coach, they're like, but I have a Facebook and I have a Instagram and I've got this and I've got that. Do I really need a website? And, there's a strategy that you really have to go through because it can be an investment and it is kind of like your electronic business card. But I'm excited to see what Brenda has to say about that. So, Brenda, thank you for being here today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You are so welcome. Before we dive into like all the goods, can you just share with us what is your background and why do you have such this passion about educating people? Like, how did you get to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is a business / entrepreneurship crisis problem with these nightmares? How did you get to where you are today?
Welcome to Business Unveiled, the podcast designed to help you thrive in the creative community. Here's your host, events and productivity consultant, Angela Profit.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Business Unveiled. Expert tips and secrets from top creative industry professionals, where we take you behind the scenes of our past experiences in the creative industry and share with you what we have learned from them and how they have made us stronger. This podcast will help you grow a productive and profitable business to launch you into success within the creative industry. Today's podcast is brought to you by Vlog Easy. That is V as in victory. Vlog Easy is an app in the iTunes store for iPhones that help you make content videos as well as vlogging on the go to share with your audience. It has absolutely transformed the way that I do video and communicate with my audience. If you are looking for an app that allows you to edit on the go, or if you simply don't know how to edit videos, this app allows you to do just that. You can record yourself in a quiet room. You don't have to remember what to say. You can simply look at your notes, and each time you're quiet and you pause, the Vlog Easy app takes all of those quiet moments out and edits everything together. It's like magic, and it saves so much time. Vlog Easy allows you to record in vertical or horizontal formatting. You can import existing videos that live on your phone into the app, and so much more. Vlog Easy Pro gives you the unlimited cloud backup as well as removing the watermark. Give it a try for free today. The link is bit.ly/vlogeasy. In all caps, Vlog Easy is case sensitive, so be sure that you've got that caps lock on and you're putting in Vlog Easy in all uppercase. V as in Victor, LOGEASY. Give it a try.
Oh boy, how much time do we have?
Loaded question.
It's been a long journey. January will actually mark my 20th year in business, and
Me
I
too, girl.
you
Yay.
do? Well, there you go. Gosh, we do have a lot in common. I've just been
Right?
both have the background in psychology. We both had 20. Gosh, this is great. Okay, we're off to a good start. So I'm actually not a developer though, and a lot of people
Okay.
wonder, when did I go to school to get into building websites? And there's a big difference between me and a lot of other companies in that I'm not the one building the websites. I run a business that builds websites. And my background is actually more on the administrative and project management kind of side of things. I would say going back, the foundations of this really started. I was raised in a home where technology was really embraced. I can remember being in the mid 80s and my dad would bring home the early Mac computers. You might remember the boxes with the tiny
Amazing.
screen. I mean, those like 20-pound,
Vintage.
the vintage ones, because he knew he saw it early on that these were going to be really important in the lives of his daughters. So he exposed us to computers at a fairly early age, and then it was probably around 88 that he formally bought one, and we were the first ones on the block with internet. And I just
Amazing.
early on, you just sometimes you find early on that thing that lights you up. And I
Mhm.
never thought I would actually build websites, but I knew I was going to probably do something with this medium because I could see
Cool.
the power of it, even in the early days of just, news groups and message boards. So I started dabbling with website design while I never actually was a developer. The days of Microsoft Front Page, I started playing with that, and I had built a fan website for a music group that I really liked, and I created multiple iterations of that. And in that process, I ended up connecting with other people that liked that particular band, and they had businesses, and they asked if I could help them with their websites. And it just kind of organically turned into this opportunity. So when I was in university, um, finishing my degree in psychology, I decided I was going to actually formally start a business on the side, part-time, doing website support for small businesses. And so that was January 2000. And I never I never anticipated full-time entrepreneurship. That was never in the roadmap. I'm not a born entrepreneur. I think some people are they know their entire life that they are not cut out to work for somebody else. That was not me. I was happy with the routine. Now I could never go back, but
Right? Amen.
oh my gosh, there's just no way. I am unemployable as far as I'm
Amen.
concerned. But so after I finished university, I actually continued working for the university in their continuing studies department. And then I left to take a job as an office administrator at a tech company. And I had only been there for a handful of months when a hand injury that I'd had in high school reared its ugly head again. And suddenly my whole job is about writing and typing, and I can't do it all of a sudden.
Yeah. Oh no.
So
This
that's
is
when,
before we could do, hey Siri, type
oh,
up.
this was before Facebook. So
Yeah.
this was before, Facebook groups and social media support. And here I was, um, a young entrepreneur, and there really were very few resources out there for those of us in our 20s who wanted to do something different. And folks who are starting their businesses now today, oh my gosh, the resources that you have at your disposal, it's just a completely different situation. Building business is still hard, but at least you can find your tribe and your community to help you, um,
Absolutely.
tackle those challenges. So that kind of forced me into entrepreneurship, and I had to quickly come out of my introvert shell and get out and start networking because there was no online networking. And I met a woman who was a graphic designer, and we just really hit it off and decided to build a company together. She would do the design, I organized the projects, and then we did that for a couple of years. And then we moved more into building websites and doing digital marketing. And from 2007 till 2013, we had a digital marketing company, with we had the employees, we had the office, we had the whole thing. And then by early January, or I think it was January 2013, we realized, okay, it's time to do something different. This is not lighting us up anymore. And we went our separate ways. Very amicable separation. We are still on very good terms. But I went back out on my own in April 2013, focused specifically on websites and largely on the wedding industry and supporting them. So the kind of the way I got into the education side of it is that I was seeing the same mistakes being made over and over by wedding industry professionals. And a lot of the time they were things that they could easily do themselves. It didn't require building a completely new website to solve these challenges. They just didn't know what they didn't know. So I started focusing a lot more on trying to teach them what those mistakes were and what they could do to avoid them in the first place and to deal with them once they had happened.
It's crazy how, like, we don't set out to do these things, right?
No.
We're like, I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm talking to myself here. It's awesome. But it's so true. It's like we don't, like now I'm in a awesome entrepreneur group. I actually used to be involved in a ton of networking groups that were kind of supposed to be focused on education, but really what it ended up being was like, what free food and drinks can everybody
Yeah.
get? And like, I never saw the value in that. And
Now,
I'm like, if I'm not walking away with something, I don't belong here.
no, and I've heard you refer to EO. Is that the group you're talking
Yes,
about? Yes,
yes,
actually, we were an EO part of EO accelerators. So
yes.
when
Like,
my business partner and I were still working together. So yeah, great
yeah.
organization.
Yeah, so like our accelerator is called Catalyst, the same thing. And I went through that almost 10 years ago, but it changed my perspective and it actually put me around the right people. And I started to learn, like, okay, Ange, go to things that are not in your industry because the wedding and events industry, and still to this day, they're so behind
Hmm.
in technology and they don't know what they don't know, like you exactly what you said, because they're so busy and focused on taking care of other people
Hmm.
that the last thing they want to do is take care of their own brand. I mean, I was so guilty of it. And so it's funny how, like, I think of my very first website and it was in Flash and it was beautiful. And actually, it wasn't my first website. I take that back. I worked at the hospital, and this guy in IT who I became good friends with, he knew I was just doing weddings for fun. And he like threw up this website. I don't even know what it probably lived on the hospital server for all I knew. I don't know. But it was some pictures and it was awful. And I didn't understand what a logo or branding was. And then after doing it for fun for a few years and people started to ask and my uncle's like, you really need to get a business license and insurance. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but okay. And so just by surrounding myself with the right people. But I had my best friend was dancing at a New Year's Eve party in LA and it was live streamed, which back then was like unheard of. Like that
Yeah.
didn't exist. So me and her mom and dad on New Year's sat around their big ass computer and watched. I don't even know how it streamed through the internet. Like it was very pixely, but the person who did the website, I'm like, I love this website. And I just reached out. I'm like, this is probably $1 million. But I reached out to him and it actually was like this really small company in LA. And him and his company, they are still to this day,
Yeah.
16 years later.
Wow.
My guys in my company, they're not cheap because they've grown. I'm probably like literally their smallest little fish, but they've grown into understanding and explaining what is visual identity. And when people are like, I want to build an app, I'm like, well, do you have all of that? Like they don't understand like the terminology terms. But
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that tight team that they've grown together and they watch each other's back and they take care of each other. I've actually heard most of the opposite with, I mean, my friends have ended up in lawsuits over
Oh, I
websites.
believe it. I've heard so many stories that resulted in legal action having to be taken.
I mean, it's terrible.
It's crazy.
So like what are the most common things that have just been like a complete nightmare? And obviously, you see the reason of like, okay, it's not like I set up to do education. Same thing with me in productivity and technology. But like, it's like I can't keep my mouth shut when I know there's a better way.
Well, when you can see somebody's doing something that's going to hurt themselves and you know how to stop it from happening, I think you're doing a disservice if you don't open your mouth.
Right? So I know that you outline like 5 things and types
Yeah.
of things that people can usually do, like backup security, things like that. So what are those 5 things that where people should just say, okay, to avoid nightmare number 1, do these things? Like, what does that look like?
What does that look like? Okay. So it does tend to fall into 5 main types of these website nightmares. There is overlap amongst them. So they can get a little bit muddy, but I kind of like to carve them out into 5 sort of different areas. And those are, number 1, not having all your logins. Number 2, not having account ownership. The third is not having backups. The fourth is not implementing proper security. And the fifth is hiring the wrong damn developers. So
Mhm.
not all of those things will happen to everybody. Some of these are specific to certain platforms. The backups and security issues tend to be more WordPress based issues, which is not surprising when you realize that like 75 million websites were powered by WordPress in 2019. So it's a big
Crazy.
target, which it makes sense why that's a bigger target. But I would say that the majority of creative industry professionals will encounter at least one of those 5 types if they don't take steps to protect themselves. So do you just want to go through kind of each of those, or maybe tackle
I
them one at a
do.
time?
Well, first I want to ask you, like, what is and you may not even have like a top one or like a favorite one of a case study where it's like this person came to you, they didn't back up or they didn't
Oh
have
my
security. Like, what
gosh,
is
I have,
do you have a top
yes.
story of like, because I feel like people can
Yeah.
understand, like, whenever I'm talking about how in college I didn't back up my computer, this is what happened back then, floppy drives. I didn't even know what the hell that was. My identity has been stolen. Our websites haven't
Yeah.
been hacked. Like, thankfully, I have people that are proactive. But now I have stories, but what are the story? I mean, I'm sure you could probably write a book
Oh,
on like,
I could probably write a book.
but like, what are the top stories where it's like people were so blindsided, like, oh my God, I didn't even know that my website wasn't backed up, or I didn't know it was
Yeah.
secure.
Yeah, definitely the backups are a big issue. If you ask a few people, ask in any Facebook group that you're in, if anybody's ever had a website horror story, and you're going to get stories flying back at you. One woman told me how they discovered that their website was gone. She got to the office and all the pages had been deleted overnight. There was just a handful of blank template pages remaining. And the hosting company's customer service basically said, well, it looks like they were deleted on your end, and they had no backup and they had nothing to be able to restore. So they ended up switching hosting companies and basically starting from scratch. Other stories, people who just 6 weeks after building and launching their first website, they had some sort of technical issue with the theme, broke the website. The hosting company support sucked, and that's going to be a common thread you're going to pick
Uh-huh.
up on.
Uh-huh.
And it was taking like a week for them to get back per response on their support
Oh my
ticket.
God.
No backup. I think the one that stands out the most to me, because it was one of my clients that it happened to, she suddenly went to her website one day and it was gone, and she's wondering, where on earth is it? I'm fully paid up on my hosting. What's going on? The hosting company had accidentally marked her account as terminated, even though she was paid up like for the next year. So her website's gone. They wouldn't talk to her on the phone. They kept saying, you have to submit a ticket by email. They
Oh
weren't
my
responding
God.
that way. She had no access to the backups on the hosting company. And I think this is a big mistake that a lot of wedding professionals and creative professionals make, is they assume that their hosting company has a backup and is going to take care of them. Well, number one, if something happens to that backup, all your eggs are in that basket. And number two, if you can't reach the hosting company for some reason, if they're not providing great customer support, and a lot of them definitely don't, if you're relying on them to restore that, then your hands are absolutely tied. Your business is dependent on them. And I never want to see somebody be dependent on somebody else for the functioning of their chief marketing vehicle. So
So how do people, because over the years, like, yes, WordPress, and then, like people of our generation, it's like the only ones like GoDaddy, Network Solutions. I think those were like the main two back then. And then now, I mean, there's Wix and Squarespace. Like there's
yeah.
so many ads of like, build it on this and da 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 da. So like what are the right questions? Even if you've been in business 30 years, people, and you have your website, which I'm hoping that you're facelifting it every year. But what are questions and what are things that people can do to make sure like this doesn't happen?
The biggest thing is that you have to take responsibility for your own backups. Now, this is going to be a WordPress specific thing. If you're on a Squarespace or a Wix or a Weebly or some other sort of site builder, it is a proprietary software and you're not going to have access to the code to be able to make backups. The only thing you could conceivably do is keep a copy of the content that you have on the website and the images and that sort of thing. But as far as the actual website goes, you're not going to be responsible for doing the backups because you can't do the backups. So I would imagine, given the business model of those companies, that they have backups upon backups, because if they don't, they are jeopardizing the integrity of their entire business. So if you're on one of those platforms, this isn't an area that you need to worry about. But if you're on WordPress, you cannot rely on your hosting company for their backups. So I'm a huge proponent of putting a third-party automated backup solution on your website. The one I always recommend is VaultPress. I have seen other backup plugins. I know some people will mention, well, I've got this one and that one's fine. But we've worked with a lot of them, and VaultPress is the only one we've never seen fail in some capacity. And it's dirt cheap. It's like $39 a year. It's
Okay, people, get VaultPress
yes, please
now.
get VaultPress. They'll help you install it if you're running into problems. They have good documentation on how to install it. Now, you might need a little developer help to do the final part of it, because and I won't go into the technical details here, but basically, if you want to be able to restore your website, there's something else you have to set up to make that possible. But even if you don't get to that point, it's really easy to set it up so it's backing up automatically. And then it's going to store 30 days worth of backups. And one of the benefits of that is that, let's say it's day 10 and you realize that on day 2 your website was hacked. Now, hopefully you will have discovered it sooner than 8 days later. But if you only had a daily backup happening with a hosting company, and if they are overwriting the daily backup, you would have a backup of the hacked website. Does that make sense?
And then, yeah, like all the code is hacked. And one of the companies that I coach, called Fetfully, they service the wedding industry. Again, you don't know what you don't know. And someone had commented on the blog, and it was being hosted by GoDaddy, and that's exactly what happened. And so she came to the realization, which, guys, if this shit happens to you, like, everything happens for a reason. Okay. So like when I lose things, I'm like, God, this is okay. I'm going to tell a story to make sure it never happens again. It's a chance for you to reboot, start over, be more relevant. It kind of forces you. And so, but I mean, there was probably over $30,000 invested into building all this code for these quizzes for these clients and these couples. And I mean, she finally was just like, okay, I'm going to have to raise money. She basically went and found an investor, and she did it. And it pushed her, but she's met so many amazing people along the way. And now she has two wonderful people backing her up. And it's actually 10xing like her productivity. So at the time, it's like everyone's kind of in tears and you're mad at yourself. And I'm like, don't put your stuff on GoDaddy without paying the $10 a month or whatever it is for the extra security, and turn your blog comments off. I
Yeah.
think I'm scarred from that. But it's like,
Well,
what can people do there on the secure side of it?
Well, I mean, if you have a backup in place, at least you know that even if the shit hits the fan, you're going to be able to restore your site. So that client whose hosting company accidentally terminated her site, I had 2 or 3 months prior said, we have to, I want you to take control of this. We have to get a backup in place. And we had set VaultPress up. So when she called me and she's just about to break down, I was able to say, okay, we're good. We've got a backup. I'm going to go set up new hosting for you on a hosting company that I actually know will take care of you. And we're going to restore your website from that backup. So even if the unexpected happens, if you have a backup, at least you can know that you're going to be able to get back up and running. But security is another aspect of it. I mean, if you can prevent this thing from happening in the first place, you're going to be a lot happier. And because not only is it going to be incredibly frustrating and scary to go through something like that, it really cuts into the time you should be spending on building your own business. You shouldn't be spending your time trying to clean up a hacked website. You should be spending it focusing on the thing that you do best. So again, this is one of those things where WordPress is, like I mentioned, is definitely going to be the bigger target. There was a Security Week article in 2018 that actually indicated 18.5 million websites are infected with malware at any given time each week, and an average website is attacked 44 times a day. That's
Whoa.
terrifying. I mean, I was reading that thing, really? We just don't see it most of the time. It doesn't mean that it's, if it's attacked 44 times a day, it doesn't mean that it's successful. But if you can put some barriers in between those hacking attempts and those infection attempts and your website, then you really should be taking that opportunity. If you're on a Squarespace, again, they are going to be responsible for managing this. But if you are on WordPress, you should be doing some very basic best practices. You need to be running your WordPress updates. And I know a lot of people think that that's just a nice to have, and that if things are working fine, why update it? You need to update it because there's often patches in there to prevent vulnerabilities from happening. So you really need to be doing it on a monthly basis. That usually monthly is sufficient, but if there's a critical release of a security update, then you need to be jumping on it a little bit faster. But even if you're just setting a monthly task in your project management software, whether you're using something like Asana, or even if you just have some sort of calendar reminder, do your updates and keep that up to date. That is probably going to plug most of the hacking attempts. I had one client who was not running her WordPress updates, and not surprisingly, she got hacked. And then we cleaned it up for her. And then a couple months later, she called me saying her website had been hacked again because she had not been doing her updates again. It's probably the biggest way that people have their websites compromised. So even if you just do that, and if you make sure that you're using strong passwords, and that you also limit the login access that you give people to your admin login, that's probably going to protect you a lot of the time. And that doesn't cost anything. These are not expensive solutions.
Yeah, be proactive.
Yeah,
Don't wait till it happens to you.
absolutely.
I do know, like, with WordPress, we pay like $89 a month. There's something with WordPress where, and maybe
Mhm.
it's through my hosting company, where you pay a monthly fee and then they take care of all of that. So like they back it up, they make sure it's secure. I'll get emails every once in a while from like my WordPress person, and they're like, hey, there's this new secure thing with Google. So when people go to your website, if people are paying attention to the URL, if it says not secure, like that means your website's not secure. It'll probably, like, smart people won't go there. And so, like, they're
Yeah,
just
that's the SSL side of things. Yeah.
so talk about that a little bit, because I feel like I was like, what? I mean, it just went over my head. I'm like, how much does it cost? I'll just pay you to do it. But not
Well, and
everybody is like that.
no, and here's the thing. If you just know that you're not going to be able to stay on top of doing the updates, and you don't have an assistant or somebody on your team that can do it, you can pay a WordPress developer to support you in that. We do it for a ton of clients every month, where we maintain it for them and they know it's taken care of. And the SSL is something that people had to make sure that so if you look at your website address, if you just have HTTP, you should have HTTPS. It means that you have an SSL certificate in there. In past days, you only really needed it if you were collecting sensitive information, but now Google Chrome is showing a sign that that the website is not secure if you don't have that. Now, it's really more of a conversion issue because, like you said, if they're smart and they see that, it just doesn't really build a lot of trust to see something saying not secure. Not all hosting companies make it easy to set that up, but some of them, like SiteGround, for example, they have a free Let's Encrypt SSL certificate, so it costs nothing. It's really easy to set up. So this is not a costly thing that you need to do. But again, a lot of this stuff can feel very overwhelming. So if you have a website developer you trust that you work with, ask them for support. This might be something that they can help you with on a monthly basis. And then I would also talk to them about putting in a security plugin. So the one I always recommend is one called Sucuri. It's SUCURI. It's malware monitoring and cleanup software. So
Okay.
basically what it'll do is it's got a firewall as well. It's going to prevent your website from being hacked in the first place. It's going to alert you if your website is compromised, and it's going to provide cleanup if your website actually does get compromised. And it's like $200 a year. And I can tell you right now that I'm not going to be able to clean up somebody's hacked website for under $200.
Oh, hell no.
Oh, absolutely not. And the great thing is that, I mean, if you do this proactively, you're probably never going to be hacked in the first place. Every client that we have had on Sucuri has been spared entirely from security threats. But if you are already in a position where your website, if you're listening to this right now and your website has been hacked, you can still set up Sucuri and they will go in and clean it up for that price. And then you'll have the protection from their system for the rest of the year for that annual cost.
So a few just super simple things, and when I go in and teach tech classes, or workshops, I cannot believe how many people don't have their logins,
Yes.
and they use the same password for everything, which I'm like a huge proponent because I've had things stolen multiple times. I'm like, guys, don't do that. Like, use one password, the app, or LastPass, or
LastPass is, yeah, that's the one I usually recommend.
I mean, these are just simple things. And then keep your website logins and stuff in that secure place. And then also not having ownership, which I feel like I could talk to you all day
Oh my
about.
gosh. Yeah.
But like one of my favorite it's stories, like this beautiful design place in New York that I was working with. They did so well. He had this guy working for him and he wanted to start his own website company. He fully supported this guy. He was his first client and everything. I don't know if this was intentional, but he was like basically building a design website for $1 million weddings and events that looked like a Beyonce website, literally. And so whenever the guy they parted ways because it didn't start to go very well after a year in. And then I got involved as a consultant just on some other things. And I started looking into things and I'm like, you don't own your domain. I'm like,
Yeah.
who is this person? And I'm like, what is this company? And he's like, oh my God, that was one of my crazy employees that I had to let go. And it was not, and I was like, well, he owns your domain. Because
Yeah.
I'm like on the back end looking at stuff. And it's like these smart business people, really creatives, who aren't smart business people, they don't know this shit.
No, not at
And
all.
then I had to contact him, and then he realized he still had control, and then he went in and changed a bunch of stuff,
Oh
but like
gosh.
really awful things like up on the pages and like held him hostage for money. I'm like, I feel like I'm in like one of those movies where like someone's kidnapping something. I mean, what is like your craziest story of people not realizing that they don't own their domain? Like that's a
And I've seen
problem.
it. It is a big problem. And I've seen, some of the worst situations happen out of that. Sometimes they're really simple. Like I have a new client who we discovered recently that the domain is not in her name. It's actually in her ex-husband's name. Fortunately, they are on very good terms and it was easy to make that transition over. But that could have gone very badly. I had one she was actually a former client. Her domain was held hostage by her developer. It actually required, this is one of those places that required legal action to regain control of it. And it was a lengthy process. And until that happened, until she actually could regain control of it, she could not use the .com of her own business name. She had to do business under an alternate version, an alternate, like I think she had to do business under the .ca instead of the .com until she could claim ownership. Somebody else told me how their brother-in-law had looked things over once and discovered that the person who had helped build the website had listed herself as the domain owner. And then when they asked her to change that, suddenly that friend became completely hostile and uncooperative. And I've had other clients where I seem to do this a lot. I seem to have to swoop in and help detach clients from the website mafia to get them.
Yes.
And you have to, it's ridiculous. You have to really be strategic and careful and try to figure out how to get access to things without setting off alarm bells that they're trying to transfer things out of the control of that person. So, I mean, if you're dealing with a situation where your developer has set up the hosting for your website in their name, if you at least have access to your domain and you have backups, we can cut that person off and get you set up and running again. But if you don't own your domain, you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So and again, like, because I feel like, I mean, now there's true professional digital marketing website companies.
mhm.
But back in the day, like where people were just kind of helping people. And again, I don't think some of the situations I've heard, I don't think it's malicious. It's just like, oh, let me take care of that for you, which I'm a control freak.
Yeah.
However, like if I'm helping someone, this actually just happened. So I don't even know how I get some of these people, but a friend of a friend of a friend who moved to Nashville. They do all these luxury home building. She's an awesome interior designer. I think it was from the design thing. She's like, oh my God, we got into this cult type real estate flipping something, and it was 10 grand for the weekend, and we paid, and this is our website and this is our domain, but this isn't our brand, and it's all, and it was terrible. And so I didn't want to like do it, but like I know how to do it, and I felt sorry for her. And so I'm like, all right, listen, I'm just gonna help you. Like, we're gonna set you up on Square. So we're gonna just do something easy to at least get that domain driving to traffic that shows what you actually freaking do, which is you do
Right.
build. Her husband's a builder and she does all the design. So I get into it, and then trying to transfer a domain from like this cult like thing to over to Squarespace shouldn't be that hard. But then like I had to throw my hands up and tell one of my team members, like, who has way more patience than me and who's way more nice than me when it comes to customer service, because I have zero threshold for any of the bullshit. I can't. And then
Your
I get really
tolerance level
rude.
leaves a little bit of
And so she spent hours and days
Yeah.
trying to get this domain. And so I'm like, what is that? So basically what happened is it was a website, or that company, Fortune Builder Real Estate something or another. I don't even know. Don't quote me on that because I don't know what it's called. But they owned, and it had nothing, the back end website had nothing to do with any, it was like some random thing, like my dog's name is Pepe.com. I mean, not that, but it was that random. And then they were forwarding that to the Fortune Builder something. Then they were forwarding that to like her domain. And like, I mean, it literally was like, I felt like a detective for a month. It literally took us almost a month to move it over. And people don't understand, like, just pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, I don't even know what that is. I'm like, you sign, and it happens a lot to doctors too. They go to these continuing medical education conferences, and they sign these $50,000 contracts where they're going to build you a new website with e-commerce, and
Gosh.
you're going to have all these amazing content and blah, blah, blah. What they don't read in the fine print, because they don't have their attorney review it, is that company owns everything. So when your contract's up 36 months later or whatever it is, and you decide, I don't want to do that anymore, you
It's
have
gone.
nothing.
Yep.
Gone.
Yep.
So it's just, oh my gosh, people, just make sure
Well,
you own your stuff.
and I understand how this happens. I think a lot of people, one of the reasons I do what I do in terms of educating around creative professionals around websites is there are so many people that are scared of their websites. There's this huge tech fear, and I completely understand it. It can feel very overwhelming. So what they do is if somebody comes in and says, I'll just take care of setting that up for you, of course they say, sure, great, you take care of it. And they don't think to follow up and say, okay, great, well, let's make sure that can I now transfer that information into my name? Like, I do this a lot for people where they want me to just take care of setting it up. But number one, I always set it up in their name. It may be attached to my temporary email address and my billing information initially, but I will always register it in their name. And the second part of that is, as soon as we're up and running, I want all of that in your hands. I don't want to be responsible for it. I don't want you to suddenly not update your credit card information and then something doesn't get renewed. I don't want that responsibility. But in that case, you're relying on your web developer to be proactive and to facilitate that process of transferring it. So I would suggest for anybody listening, log into your domain. And for a lot of you, you're not going to know where that is right now. So that's step number one, is figure out what all your logins are, and then log into your domain account, log into your hosting as well, but especially your domain, and make sure it's actually registered in your name with your contact information and attached to an email address that you actually have access to.
Yes, stop what you're doing now. If you've never done this,
Pause this episode.
pull over, because I know a lot of you listen when you're driving.
Okay, when you get home, you can do this.
Yes, but it's like, guys, it's that important. Like, it is that important. So if somebody is listening and they're like, shit, like, it's not like I'm finding myself in this situation, like, what is your recommendation? Like, what the hell should they do?
Well, if they don't know where it's registered and they just don't even know how to get started and they're feeling completely stuck, go to your web developer. They can probably help you with the detective work to figure out at least where it's located. And you may end up having to get on a call with the domain registrar and giving them some information to prove that you are in fact the owner of that, so that you can reset up the login information if you don't have that. That happens very frequently. This is why all of these steps can just be totally avoided if you take care of this in the beginning. But we have had to do detective work to figure out, okay, where is it located? Okay, how are we going to regain access to this? Most of the time you can regain access, and then it's pretty smooth sailing from there. If you can't, or you find out that it's attached to an email address you don't have access to, then you kind of have to start taking it step by step to figure out, okay, what's the next step here to try to regain access to this. And hopefully you don't find yourself in a situation where you're having to file legal action against somebody because they're not accommodating and giving you what is rightfully yours. I have heard people who've had to scrap a domain and start fresh with a new website. And I mean, you can avoid that altogether. I think that's what breaks my heart most of the time, is I see people in these situations, and I know that if somebody had just guided them with a few quick tips that cost them nothing or very little money, they would have been able to avoid all of that heartache in the first place.
Yeah, and like, I'll say, our website developers, they're very protective, and I'm so appreciative. And it's like, it happened one time. It only takes one time. And we were working with someone who is, I thought I was just going to outsource like lead pages and ClickFunnels and all this stuff that I didn't want to do. And then I find out, like, oh, they're stealing from me. Like, that's
Oh,
not good.
gosh.
I should probably figure this out myself. So now, like, I've educated myself. It's given me multiple migraine headaches over the years. However, when we were starting to implement and tie some of the lead pages, so that we could look at conversions and track things, one of my team members, she's like, we really need to put a pixel on all of your pages on your website and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that's so over my head. And so it's basically for tracking. And that's another important thing, that if you're spending even $1 a day on some type of ads or online whatever, which SEO is very expensive. But the thing with like your domain and your content, we've learned over the years that if you put out consistent content with consistent keywords, you get organic placement. And
Mhm.
that's why your domain is so valuable. If you've had it for 20 years, like you can't go back and pay
No.
any amount of money to get that organic reach where the Google algorithms, I don't even know how it freaking works. They used to call it like the little spiders that crawl up and down Google. But I guess to like put it in terms that people can actually understand. So do you have any best practices currently for people that they think they're going to put a brand new website up with a brand new domain and they're going to pay Google $5,000 a month for this high placement? I mean, what are your thoughts on like actual paying to be at the top versus organic content? Because it's such a difference.
Yeah, and I will say right at the outset that SEM and SEO is not my wheelhouse, but I know a little something about it because I work quite closely with Shay Bailey, who's my SEO specialist, and we do a lot of SEO projects and trainings together. Um, his opinion is that you are going to end up having to do a combination of both. If the landscape is so competitive now, and there's a lot that you can do in terms of organic, but like you said, if you hire somebody, it's quite expensive, and you can do it yourself, but it's a lot of work. But even if you are having somebody work on your SEO or you're working on it yourself, chances are you are going to need to invest in some paid advertising as well if you really want to get the reach that you're looking for. Um, I hesitate to say too much more about that simply
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's not my wheelhouse. But you're
Right. But
absolutely
it's
right that
just,
you have to pay attention to it. Somebody told me the other
yeah.
day, she said she felt like SEO was not a thing anymore, and that now it was, what'd she call it? It was user engagement optimization instead. And I think there's a misnomer here that they're not two separate things. User engagement SEO is kind of the fourth thing. We talk about four types of SEO. There's on-page, off-page, technical, and then there's this engagement SEO. How people engage with your website is one of the top three ranking factors that Google looks at. It's content, backlinks, and engagement.
So to back up for people who don't know what all of those means, like on page, off page,
Right.
just dumb it down for us.
Okay.
So what, and also too, the other big thing that I've seen on some of our clients, we go into the back end and it's like none of the fields like tags, meta
Right.
tag, like it's not filled out. So it's like someone built them a website. It looks really pretty on the front end, but guess what? People pretty don't work when
Oh,
the
yeah.
back end isn't set up. So if you could just share some pointers with like what that means, front page, back page, filling out all
All
this
those
stuff.
things, sure.
Yeah.
So on-page optimization, on-page SEO are all the things that you can actually do on your website. So it is going to be things like if you are on WordPress and they have Yoast, the Yoast plugin is very common. You can fill in your description tags and your title tags and all of those things. These are places where you can put keyword content that you are targeting. Off page are the things that you do that aren't on your website. So building links, backlinks back to your website, getting listed in directories, for example, doing link outreach to try to get yourself listed on other websites, or doing guest blogging, all those things that would build traffic back to your website. Technical SEO it is a higher level of this is where I could drop a lot of jargon and I won't, but you're going to be looking more at the page speed optimization of your website. A lot of people don't understand that if you have a slow website, not only does that kill your conversions, that will also have a negative impact on your SEO, which is why page speed optimization and conquering a sluggish website is something I do a lot of educating around as well. So technical is going to be those more advanced things that you can do to your website to improve the chances of Google ranking you. And then engagement SEO is how people behave on your website, how long they're looking at your content, and how many pages they're visiting on your content. It is so overwhelming for most people because there are so many factors that go into it. And I think this is where a lot of folks just kind of figure, I'm just not going to deal with this. It's too much. I just don't know what to do next. But I think if they have a bit of a checklist, Shay and I actually did put a 90-day SEO checklist together for people to help them focus on the right things to do and how they can start getting some lift on their SEO in a 3-month period if they just check these boxes off. So I might give you a link to that if you think that might be something
Yeah.
helpful for your audience.
Yeah, I think I mean, anything that, and again, y'all, I've learned like these terms and stuff out of necessity because I'm
Mhm.
like, how did this happen? Like, I don't understand. Like, the one guy that we worked with in the beginning, we gave him the whole back end to WordPress, which my website developer was and he's like, I just don't feel good about this. Like, do you trust this guy? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, just do it. Well, guess what? Like, he messed a bunch of stuff up. It cost me thousands of dollars to have it
Yeah.
fixed. And then Dommy and my lead guy's like, I'm never doing that again. I don't care what you say. He's like, you can have the back end of the key to keep it on fire, but they're very protective. You
Oh, I get it.
can,
I
yeah,
completely understand where he's coming from, because people don't realize that if you're just handing out administrative access to your website willy-nilly, every single person you've given that to has the ability to completely take your website down, whether
yeah, I didn't know
purposefully or
that.
not. Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's like I've learned all these things the hard way, but
Yeah.
like take responsibility and make sure that you're at least like covering yourself. Like we're busy running businesses, like you don't want to deal with these unexpected nightmares that you wake up and you're like, where's my website? Like
Yeah.
one more crazy story, a friend of mine, they agreed on she'll pay X amount of dollars to build the website, which I know that's really hard when, things come up. Code, I don't even, I'm not even going to say it because I don't even know what all the words mean. But like, she wanted some more things done. They gave her a price. She decided she wasn't going to pay for that. And so they basically went in and put on every page of her website, the website's down until you pay your bill. So
Oh, ouch.
basically, all of her clients were seeing that. So one of her clients actually went on the website and she emailed her and she was like, hey, I tried to get into the website because she has a subscription based service where people go and log in to get the monthly style tips and pictures and the clothes coming out for the season and all that. She's like, I paid my bill. I don't understand why I can't get in. And it kept happening where clients thought
That it
that
was a
that
message to
message,
them. Oh my
yes,
gosh.
it was awful, and she had to sue him and take him to court. Like, it was such, I mean, she ended up in the hospital for days because her blood pressure was so high. Like, people don't let that happen.
Well,
Like, I
and
remember going to the
unfortunately,
hospital, I'm like, "Oh my god."
unfortunately, that's another one of those nightmares that can happen, is just ending up hiring a developer, a web
Yes.
designer who is just straight from hell.
Yeah.
And it's a harder one to avoid, because it's not like I can say, here, put this plugin in and it'll protect you from evil developers. It's The reality is that it is a lot more difficult to prevent that from happening. And the biggest thing I can say is you have to do your due diligence when you're hiring. I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to during sales calls for potentially working together to build a website, and I flat on offer up references to clients, and I'm like, please talk to my previous clients, ask them what the process was like, learn more about how we work. Nobody checks references for web developers, and I don't understand why.
Why? Ask for case studies, people. Like, I was looking at your website and you've got multiple case studies on here of how you've helped people. And guys, so Brenda has her own podcast too. Tell them how they can go and listen to all these fabulous tips and learn
It's
more.
It is called the Create a Better Website podcast with BrendaCadman. Fairly new. We just launched it on September 18th, and the feedback has been very positive so far. So I'm really glad
Yay.
that I switched to doing that over weekly video, because I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to batch up
Yeah.
audio than it is video. So yeah, if you just go search for that on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, you will find that. I do need to get myself listed on Stitcher and Spotify and all the other ones, but
Yeah.
it's fairly new. So these are the kinds of things that I'm trying to talk about. They are shorter episodes. They tend to be more in the 15 to 30 minute range, because I know that a lot of what I talk about can feel quite heavy,
Mhm.
and I try to make it as accessible as possible and understandable as possible, but I want to focus on bite-sized chunks of website education so that people can slowly but surely build up their website confidence and know the questions to ask, and know, if they are hiring a developer, this will be an upcoming episode topic, is the questions to ask if you are hiring a website developer, so you
Yes.
improve your chances of getting somebody that not only is technically capable of doing the work, but is also going to be a good working fit for you. Because you've mentioned this long relationship you've had with your developer. I actually have a gentleman that I still support on his website, and he was a client before I was even officially a business. I've worked with him for more than 20 years. And
That's awesome, though.
that only happens because you find a really good fit. So there are
Mhm.
questions you can ask to make sure that you've improve the chances of finding that right person. And unfortunately, I guess like in
It's
any
hard.
industry, there's a lot of bad apples out there that make it a lot harder for the rest of us.
It's hard. So if people have questions that they want you to talk about on the podcast, would they go to bondaccordcreative.com and submit or email you a question? If people have follow up
Mhm.
from this podcast, what is the best way for them to contact you?
So they can contact me on the website, or if they go to the website, they can also find a link to our Facebook group, or you can just jump in Facebook and look for it directly. If you look for Create a Better Website Podcast Community, you'll find the Facebook group. And then not only can you post questions you have that you would like me to cover on the podcast, you can also just share any questions you have about your website in general, and you'll probably get some feedback from the rest of the community. We have over 3,000 members in there right now. It
Wow, that's
originally started as a wedding industry group, specifically websites for wedding industry professionals. So if you are in a creative field, you're going to probably find a lot of other folks in there who have similar experiences and can provide some feedback.
And those of us who are creative, we need the most help when it comes to this. So it like makes you feel a little bit better. And then you have this free website planning guide
I do, yeah.
that it's like how to avoid common mistakes. And so where can people go and get that?
If they go to, actually, if they just go straight to createabetterwebsite.com/plan,
Okay.
that will redirect them to the guide.
Okay. So guys, we'll put that in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't stop to write that down. Or you can't really tell Siri to multitask. Did you know now you can tell if people subscribe to your podcast and you tell Siri, like, hey Siri, listen to the latest episode on, like, my phone's going to react right now, and it will play the latest episode on that
Oh,
podcast.
cool.
It's so cool.
Siri and
Like,
I have a love-hate relationship because I have an 8-year-old who likes to play with Siri and ask her absolutely ridiculous questions. So I'm a little tired of it.
yeah, it's so funny. Like, but I truly, like, probably 50 or 60 times a day, I'm like, hey Siri, hey Siri. So I mean, it just, once you start like using those reminders, I really, like you were saying a long time ago where you couldn't type, like I have carpal tunnel from the old
Right.
days of typing, like my elbows hurt, my neck hurts. And like, although we have all Apple products, ergonomically, you guys, that's what Apple is focused on, is a good experience for ergonomics, so your joints don't hurt. But I really try hard to not touch and type, because then I don't have to like go soak in Epsom salt for 2
Oh, I
hours.
totally hear you. I mean, I still struggle with it's tenosynovitis in my
Yeah,
de Curvain's tenosynovitis. It's in my thumb. And you don't
it's so
realize
painful.
how much you use your thumb and
Mhm.
your fingers until you can't all of a sudden. So yeah, I'm huge on, I dictate like as much as I
Yep.
possibly can.
Yep. I have BlackBerry thumb. Anybody remember BlackBerry?
I had one.
I'm so dating myself, but it's like I loved that little wheel, but having that little wheel and like having BlackBerry thumb, it really, I mean, the older you get, like I love my age and I love that, the older we get, the more wise we get, the more experience we get, the more people respect you. So it's good. But like those bad habits with like doing things on tech early on in my career, it kills me. And like I'll see people even at the airport and sitting next to me in the airplane, and I so get in their business. I'm like, you know that you can just like put your thumb right there and the pressure goes there, and you can do this with 2 and 3 fingers, and you don't have to do that. And that, like, this is why. And they're like, quit talking to me. But it's like I just can't help it. But actually, they're very thankful because people they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
It's the same thing. Yeah, they don't know what they don't know, and sometimes we're resistant to changing the way that we do things. But once we understand that it's for the betterment, whether it's our health or our physical well-being or the health of our website, I think most people are more receptive, because once the injury is there, whether it's to you physically or to your website, it's a lot harder to fix it and deal with it.
It is. Well, this has been so amazing and enlightening. And people, please go back and listen to this if you're driving, and make sure that you own your website. That's the first thing. Make sure it's secure, and go over to Brenda's website and get this free guide, and make sure that you are doing these things. And then, of course, if you're like, I don't know what to do, you can just reach out to Brenda. She's there to help.
I am indeed.
Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening to another episode of Business Unveiled. Be sure to tune in next week for more great tips and like juicy. This was like good, juicy, just hard stuff that people need to know. So everybody have a great day. Bye. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with your friends. And I'm so very grateful if you leave a review. Be sure you are a subscriber so you never, ever miss the juicy details of Business Unveiled. Also, be sure that you are part of my email list. And if you're not, sign up today at angelaprofit.com, where I share valuable resources and exclusive products with only my subscribers. Now, before I go, I want to ask you, if you have a story or a product to share with the creative industry, please let me know. To be considered as a guest on Business Unveiled, visit angelaprofit.com and submit a podcast guest form. Until next time, remember to stay productive and profitable.
You've been listening to Business Unveiled with Angela Profit. Join us next time as we share our experiences to help you be more productive and profitable in your creative business. For more great resources, visit angelaprofit.com.